Oh, hello. Welcome to my bar review show. Today we're talking about agency. There are three main parts to agency: agency relations, uh, partner and principal and agent's relationship with third parties, and principal and agent's rights and duties to relationship. So, relations, third parties, rights and duties. Time for a break. You can pause the video and come back when you like. All right, let's go. Agency relations. Creation of agency relationship. Power to bind may be expressed orally or in writing, implied by principal's conduct, or misinterpreted by a third party. Expressed orally or in writing. So here's in writing, you have a contract. Here's a handshake, that's oral. Implied by principal's conduct. If principal hires a rent collector to collect his rent, or a principal hires a real estate agent to sell or buy his house, that is implications. Then you can misinterpret, where a third party thinks agent is working on P's behalf, but that's not really the case. All right, if you need this information, you can pause the video and come back when you like. Relationships existence. Principal manifests dissent to agent. Then agent acts on principal's behalf. Agent's actions are subject to principal's control. And A manifests dissent or otherwise consents. Principal manifests dissent to agent. Congratulations, you're still my agent, said Rod, the principal, to Jerry, the agent. Agent acts on principal's behalf. You shouldn't have begged me to hire him, says the Camel Chevy director. Agent Jerry was acting on Rod, principal's behalf by trying to get him a Camel Chevy commercial. Agent's actions are subject to principal's control. You don't need a camel, you got Rod Tidwell, says Rod, the principal. So Rod, the principal, is saying what he does not want. He does not want the camel. Agent manifests dissent or otherwise consents. I'm pulling him from this. An athlete of your stature, this isn't what I had in mind, says Jerry. So Rod doesn't want to be in the commercial, so Jerry is pulling him from the commercial. Principal. Principal's control. Principal has right to control, result, or ultimate objectives of agent's work. Principal types can be an individual, an employer, an entrepreneur, corporation, or partnership. Individual. Person's status as principal is established by the person's intent to delegate the act and control the way in which another performs the act. Employer. Principal who employs employee to perform services and has right to control the physical conduct of employee's performance. Principal controls the day-to-day activities, supplies trade tools, structures the pay period, requires specialized skill, and directs work to completion. Principal employer controls day-to-day activities, supplies trade tools, structures pay period, requires specialized skill level, and directs work to completion. Entrepreneur. Jerry, when he goes out on his own, is a principal, becomes a principal of his company, an entrepreneur. The principal type could be a corporation. They could also be a partnership. Agent. Relationships consensual nature. Agent must have minimal capacity, manifest dissent, agreement with opinion, consent to act on principal's behalf, and consent to be subject to principal's control. If you need this information, you can pause the video and come back when you like. Agent types can be an individual, an employee, an independent contractor, a gratuitous agent, a trustee, or a subagent. Individual. Jerry Maguire is an individual agent. Employee is paid hourly or works for long periods. Work is integral to that of principal, and tasks are completed under principal's control. Independent contractor is not subject to principal's control regarding physical conduct of agent's performance. Gratuitous agent does not prevent agency relationships creation, but does prevent an enforceable contract. Trustee, subject to settlers or beneficiaries' control. Subagent, person appointed by agent to perform functions agent has agreed to perform for principal. Formation of agency relationship. If you need this information, you can pause the video and come back when you like. Capacity. Principal must consent to enter a relationship in transaction to which agent purports to bind principal. Agent just needs physical or mental capability to do whatever agent has been appointed to do. Minors or incompetents can be agents, but minors cannot form contracts. Unincorporated associations cannot be agents. Consent. Both principal and agent must consent, but agent can manifest assent by performing acts on principal's behalf. Consideration is not necessary. Writing is not necessary. Time for a break. You can pause the video here and come back when you like. All right, let's get into the meat of this: principal and agent's relationship with third parties. Note, bar exam questions are going to come from these following sections. All right, principal's contract liability has several parts: actual authority, apparent authority, authority termination, estoppel, and ratification. Actual authority. Express actual authority. Oral or written words, clear, direct, and definite language, or specific detailed terms and instructions. Intent. Principal's manifestation must cause agent to believe agent is doing what principal wants, subjective standard, and agent's belief must be reasonable, objective standard. Dissent. Principal must give clear notice if principal disagrees with agent's actions. Implied actual authority allows agent to take whatever actions are properly necessary to achieve principal's objectives based on agent's reasonable understanding of principal's manifestations and objectives. Jerry can book Rod to appear in a Chevy commercial involving a camel because Rod wants Jerry to show Rod the money. Custom. Absent contrary instructions, agent has implied authority to act within accepted business customs or general trade usage within the industry. Acquiescence. Implied by principal's acceptance of agent's acts, or principal's failure to object to unauthorized actions of agent that affirm agent's belief regarding principal's objectives and support A's perceived authority to act in future. So this is a little complicated. So acquiescence is implied easily by principal's acceptance of A's acts. Jerry does something, Rod accepts it. But the more complicated one is principal's failure to object to. So Jerry does something that Rod doesn't like or is wrong, and Rod doesn't say anything. Failure to object. Unauthorized actions of A that affirm A's belief regarding principal's objectives and support A's perceived authority to act. So, Jerry does something that is unauthorized. Rod doesn't say anything. Jerry does something that Rod did not authorize, and Rod doesn't say anything. But Jerry's act has to involve Jerry's belief regarding Rod's objectives and support agent's perceived authority to act in the future. So it's not just that Jerry does something that's unauthorized. Jerry has to do something unauthorized that he thinks Rod wants and that he thinks that he has authority to do. Kind of complicated, but it's pretty simple after you talk about it. Delegate. Generally, A is prohibited from delegating either express or implied authority to a third party without the principal's express authorization. Apparent authority, principal's behavior, derives from third parties' reasonable reliance on that third party's perception of authority level, derives from third parties' reasonable reliance on that third party's perception of authority level granted agent by agent's behavior over a time period. Third party's reasonable belief is based on past dealings between principal and agent, trade customs, relevant industry standards, principal's written authority statements, transactions not benefiting principal, and extraordinary transactions for principal. Agent's position. By appointing agent to specific position, for instance, vice president or general manager, principal makes manifestation to the public. Agent has that position's customary authority level. Authority termination involves revocation or renunciation, agency agreement, circumstances change, time's passage, principal's death or suspension of powers, principal's capacity loss, agent's death or suspension of powers, statutorily mandated termination, or agent's fiduciary breach. Revocation or renunciation, effective as soon as either party gives notice to other party, unless agent's power is coupled with interest in power subject matter. Agency agreement. Principal and agent mutually agree to terminate agent's authority or on occurrence of specified circumstances in agreement. Circumstances change. Should cause agent to reasonably believe principal no longer consents to agent acting on principal's behalf. For instance, a law change, insolvency, dramatic change, business conditions change, subject matter's destruction, or a disaster. Time's passage, reasonable time period. Principal's death or power suspension. Not automatic. The modern trend is A's actual authority terminates on notice. Principal's capacity loss. Modern trend is A's actual authority terminates on notice. Agent's death. So now we're talking about the agent dying or power suspension. Automatically terminates agent's actual authority. Statutorily mandated termination. So the law says it has to end, or agent's fiduciary duty breach. Estoppel applies when a third party is justifiably induced to make detrimental change in position because third party believed transaction was entered for principal and principal failed to take reasonable steps and use ordinary care. Ratification. Principal must ratify entire act or transaction. Principal must have legal capacity. Ratification must be timely and principal must have knowledge of material facts involved in original act. All right, principal's liability to third parties in tort for agent's torts. Liability has two parts. Principal's vicarious liability to third parties for agent's torts and principal's direct liability. Principal's vicarious liability to third parties for agent's torts. Respondeat superior. Principal is vicariously liable to third party harmed by agent who is employee and who committed act within employment scope. Employment scope. Employee within employment scope when either performing employer-assigned work or engaging in course of conduct subject to employer's control. Intentional torts may fall within employment scope when conduct is within employment space and time limits. Employee was motivated to act for employer's benefit. An act was of kind employee was hired to perform. Work-related travel. Commuting is not within employment scope, but travel to perform work is within employment scope. Frolic and detour. Frolic. Employee's personal errand involving significant deviation from performing work is outside employment scope. Detour. Personal errand travel may be within employment scope if trip is merely detour. Agent's apparent authority. If third party reasonably believes agent acted with actual authority and it is traceable to principal's manifestation, then principal is vicariously liable for agent's tort, misrep, defamation, conversion, even if agent's conduct is not beneficial to principal. Reliance on care and skill. One who represents another is agent and causes third party to justifiably rely on apparent agent's care and skill is subject to liability for harm caused by care and skill lack. Principal's direct liability. Agent has actual authority or principal's ratification. Principal authorizes conduct or intended conduct's consequences, or principal affirms prior act done or purportedly done on principal's behalf. Negligence in selecting, supervising, or controlling agent. Non-delegable duties. When responsibility is so important to community that persons shouldn't be permitted to transfer responsibility to another. Inherently dangerous activities. All right, agent's liability. Contract liability. Agent's liability as contract party. Disclosed principal. Agent does not become contract party if agent enters contract on principal's behalf and third party has notice of both principal's ID and principal's existence. Enters contract on P's behalf, third party has notice of principal's ID, third party has notice of principal's existence. A's liability or partially disclosed principal. A becomes a contract party when third party only has notice of principal's existence, not principal's ID. Undisclosed principal. If agent binds principal to contract and third party has no notice of principal's existence, then both agent and principal are contract parties. Third party liability to undisclosed principal. Liable unless principal is excluded by contract terms or principal's existence was fraudulently concealed. Undisclosed principal's liability to third party. Liable if third party detrimentally changes position. A's implied warranty of authority. If agent lacks power to bind principal, then breach has occurred. If agent does not bind principal, then agent is not liable under this implied warranty, even if agent exceeded authority. Fraudulent concealment. Principal or agent must have notice. Third party would not have dealt with principal. Must have noticed. Third party would not have dealt with principal. Tort liability. Agent is liable to third party for negligent and intentional conduct, but is not liable for principal's torts. And we are back to normal. Time for a break. You can pause the video and come back when you like. All right, let's do the third part, rights and duties to relationship. Principal's rights and duties. Principal's rights. Agent can be liable in tort and contract. Control of agent. Right to control. Agent's acts on principal's behalf. Agent's care duty. Agent must follow principal's instructions and perform duties, tasks, and transactions with reasonable care, diligence, and judgment. Agent's loyalty or obedience duty. Agent should avoid acts in A's self-interest. Agent should avoid acts in A's self-interest in agency matters and refrain from secretly profiting from transactions on principal's behalf. Notice and accounting. Principal is entitled to notice of all relevant issues and accounting of property or funds used on principal's behalf. Principal's duties to agent. Deal fairly and in good faith per contract terms. Provide agent with info concerning risks of physical or financial harm or loss. Principal knows, but agent does not. Duty not to injure A's business reputation. Compensation. If principal expressly or impliedly agreed to pay agent. Non-interference duty. With agent's agency work completion. Indemnify duty. Against pecuniary loss suffered in connection with agency relationship and within scope of agent's actual authority, but not for agent's negligence or illegal or wrongful conduct. Principal's remedies for agent's breach. Injunctions, breach of contract action, tort action, rescission, restitution, accounting, agency relationship termination, compensation forfeiture or disgorgement. Agent's rights and duties. Agent's rights. Compensation. Not have principal interfere. Indemnification or reimbursement. Safe work environment. And contract or tort remedies. A's duties to principal. A loyalty duty. To act solely for principal's benefit, whether A is compensated or free, including not dealing with principal as an adverse party without principal's knowledge, not acquiring material benefit in actions on principal's behalf, not usurping business opportunities or competing with principal, and not using principal's confidential information. Performance-based duties, contractual duties, care and diligence A exercises in similar circumstances, obedience, contractual duties, care or diligence A exercises in similar circumstances, obedience, provide relevant info and accounting. And we are done.